Paranormal Activity etched its name in horror lore as one of those rare marketing moments that altered the very fabric of the genre as we knew it. A cultural phenomenon that stood for everything that we loved about the genre. A movie that made you feel something in a way that only horror can provide. Some went home and turned on all the lights in the house. Some scoffed, proudly unbothered by its attempts to creep them out. But everyone saw it. Everyone talked about it. Most of them thirsty for more home video shenanigans. And how the hell do you follow that up? Well, this is what happened to Paranormal Activity 2. In 2007, Paranormal Activity made close to $200 million on a $15,000 budget, meaning the Corleones themselves could have put a severed horse head in the bed of every exec at Paramount Pictures to stop a sequel from happening, and it wouldn't have mattered. A sequel was inevitable. But it was going to be impossible to recreate that cultural shock that Paranormal Activity had on the world. It had ushered in a new era of horror filmmaking, the same way that Scream or the Blair Witch Project had before. As a matter of fact, you could look to those two franchise starters for inspiration. Would they try to recreate the wheel or simply create a cadence for the franchise? Scream 2 followed mostly the same playbook as its predecessor and was a wild success. Meanwhile, Book of Shadows went off the reservation and was decidedly not. Paramount would choose to follow the former's footsteps and create another low-budget security cam extravaganza. Also in the same vein as Scream 2, it would follow many of the rules of a sequel, where slasher sequels carry with them a bigger body count and more elaborate death scenes. Paranormal Activity 2 would feature a bigger home, bigger family, and more jump scares. And yeah, a slightly bigger body count. Not that hard to do considering the previous film ended with one official death, where bitch-ass Micah was hurled at a camera. Michael R. Perry would get the go-ahead to write the film. Perry would also go on to write the underrated horror comedy The Voices, starring Ryan Reynolds. The writer would work hand-in-hand with Almost director Kevin Grudert, who had only one feature film under his directorial debut at the time in Saw 6. Grudert was extremely excited about the prospect of directing Paranormal Activity 2, but alas, it was not to be, as there was a bit of a conflict. Lionsgate had found an option in the director's contract that would force him by law to come back to the franchise and direct Saw 3D, everyone's favorite Saw. Kidding, of course. The obvious choice of the first film's director, Oren Peli, was also out due to his responsibilities with his next found footage venture, Area 51. Akiva Goldsman was at one point in consideration, but ended up as an executive producer instead. Other excellent considerations were Session 9 and The Machinist director Brad Anderson, and Wolf Creek director Greg McLean. But for one reason or another, the duties of director fell to mostly newcomer Todd Williams. With the director finally in tow, filming began. But the burden of creating a sequel to this low-budget, high-expectation horror film wouldn't come without pressure and controversy. Almost 1 month into filming, a brand new writer's room was assembled after the footage so far had been deemed disastrous. Disturbia writer and almost Scream 7 director Christopher Landon was brought in along with writer Tom Pabst, and one draft after another, Paramount was finally convinced to convene filming. In the story finally put to screen, we're treated to a brand new family with an excellent built-in excuse to provide us with multiple found footage angles of ghostly happenings. After a successful Burger King franchise owner's San Diego home is ransacked by a mystery burglar or entity, he decides to protect it by installing multiple motion detector cameras throughout his home. There's even one on their beautiful pool, where the ghost hilariously keeps removing the vacuum. The genius tie-in to all of this is that the family in peril belongs to the sister of Paranormal Activity's Katie, who makes several appearances in the home as the family deals with their entity. For a film that had so much trouble getting a green light for its story, things tie together rather impeccably. The family being haunted is a refreshing blend of lovable and flawed humans, complete with a German shepherd and a newborn baby, a happy-go-lucky teenager, her horny boyfriend, and a housekeeper with a heart of gold. The most likable dad kind of seems like a dick when he refuses to listen to his family's ghost concerns. and especially when he fires the lovable housekeeper for trying to protect the home in unconventional ways. These feel like normal, wealthy people, and their reactions to all this were golden. The cast often weren't aware of the hijinks about to occur, such as the legendary scene where the entire kitchen jump-scared the shit out of both Christie and the audience. The genius of the script comes from the way that it ties into the original film. Even dickface Micah from the original shows up in the family videos, with his creepy attitude towards Katie's niece Allie. Eventually, this all ties into the family history of Katie and her sister Christie's childhood, when a demon haunted them. After a few nights of being terrorized by demons, and through some trusty horror movie search engine discovery, Allie learns the truth. Someone at some point in the family made a deal with a demon, possibly for wealth or power, and now it wants their firstborn son, sincerely hoping it wasn't for those Burger King franchises. This leads to the awful realization that this demon wants to take with it that baby back to hell, which in turn leads to multiple scenes of audience anguish when the baby starts to levitate from its crib or crawl around unattended. Paranormal Activity 2 was genius in the way that it threatened the audience with danger to not only the baby, but the family dog. It was truly a wild experience to sit in an audience and watch those around you freak out as Toby floated around taunting us with threats to them. To hell with the adult humans, we came to see them die. You leave those cute creatures alone. When all is said and done, after an anarchy-fueled shaky cam fest in the basement, we're left with the realization that these events took place days before the events of the original film. After Katie sent douchebag Micah's body careening into the camera, she showed up at her sister's residence, snapping necks and stealing babies. Finally, the cold, ominous credits would have let us know that both Katie and the baby were still missing to this day. Haunting stuff. This demonic story would release in the Halloween sweet spot of October 22nd, 2010. Backed by more of the same genius marketing that featured shots of audience members treated to early screenings, losing their proverbial shit in night vision. Something that would call back to the release of the original Paranormal Activity, and again included a request a screening in my area online call to action. The marketing was so good, in fact, that Cinemark Theaters pulled a June 2010 trailer for the film after complaints from Twilight sequel moviegoers that the trailer was too frightening. That, or someone was throwing up or passing out, make for the greatest horror movie marketing that a company can hope for.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
This all led to Paranormal Activity 2 breaking the record for the biggest midnight opening for an R-rated film and the biggest opening for a horror movie ever at the time. It would garner a similarly insane return on investment as the first film, with a whopping worldwide total of over $175 million on a budget of just $3 million. Critics were lukewarm, and some complained that the sequel didn't cover any new ground, while others lauded the uptick in eventful scares throughout the film. Audiences enjoyed it at the clip of a B cinema score, and the general feeling at the time was that the film either A, scared the crap out of moviegoers, or B, was the definition of a dumb sequel. Sure, it was in many ways a retread of what had come before, but it was also the pure definition of a horror sequel, in that it took a successful idea and slammed the holy shit button a few times, providing a financially backed caffeine boost. In contrast to the original, moments like the entire freaking kitchen exploding at once, or the night vision Royal Rumble at the end, felt like a natural progression of what had come before. In the end, Paranormal Activity 2 is one of the better sequels in the franchise, and solidified it as a worthy sequel to a pillar of the horror community. No easy feat, especially when you consider franchise derailers such as the aforementioned Book of Shadows, or franchise killers like Sinister 2. The job of a first sequel to a horror disruptor is a thankless one. In the case of Paranormal Activity 2, it not only kept interest in the franchise alive and well, but impressively fattened the pockets of those involved. And as we all know, the franchise thrived afterwards, surviving for 5 more films of varying degrees of quality, up to the time of this writing at least. As we all know, you can never, under any circumstances, assume that a franchise is dead. They always come back for one last scare, especially when Blumhouse is involved. And that, my friends, is what happened to Paranormal Activity 2.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo remains an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.